He was despised, rejected, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. He was despised, rejected, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief.
And then, he follows them when they leave his house, shadows in the streets of Jerusalem, watches as they enter the garden, edges in after them. He hears lowered voices as they talk, sees shadows shift and settle as they move. The silence is immense. He sleeps. He wakes to that voice. The teacher speaks. A crowd of people arrive. One of them approaches the teacher, kisses him. The sound of a sword being drawn, a cry of pain. A torch flares and he finds himself looking at those hands again, pressed to the head of a servant. He thinks he sees blood. The hands move away. He watches as men seize the teacher and drag him away. Hears the rustle of leaves, quick footfalls all around him. A light blazes in his face. Hands grab at his clothes. He twists out of them and runs.
He was despised, rejected, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. He was despised, rejected, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief.
She sits at the window of her spare, sparse home. No oil lamp burns. She sees people hurry past, hears whispers. She rises, leaves her home, follows them. She dares to enter the high priest's courtyard. A fire burns. Guards around it warm their hands. She listens to their talk. Her eyes widen and turn to the building behind her. In a shadowy corner, she settles to wait. Draws her cloak around her, looks to the fire. A man stands with the guards. She knows his face. He was there that day, outside the temple. A servant girl approaches him, looks into his face, speaks. He shakes his head firmly, turns, walks away. She hears a cockerel crow. He moves to the gate. A huddle of people. The servant girl follows, speaks, nods her head at him. He frowns, shakes his head violently, strides away, stops by her corner. She waits, eyes fixed on him. Some people nearby speak. "Aren't you one of those that followed Jesus? You're from Galilee, aren't you?" She sees his face as he shouts his reply. "I tell you, I don't know this man you're talking about." A cockerel crows. She watches his face. He looks wildly about him. She steps out of the shadows and their eyes meet. As his tears begin to fall, she remembers the eyes of the teacher.
He was despised, rejected, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. He was despised, rejected, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief.
The man unties his donkey, climbs on, sets off for Jerusalem, follows the crowds until they stop. They swarm in huge numbers, swelling the courtyard. Stretching up, he sees the governor standing, addressing the people. Watches as two men are led out by the guards. He knows one of them. The man who borrowed his donkey stands with hands bound together. The crowds begin to cheer. He sees men move through the people, speaking into ears as they go. His eyes flick between the two prisoners on the platform. He watches as the prisoner he doesn't know is released and walks away. Watches as the guards raise their whips to the prisoner who remains. Hears the crowd roar as the man who borrowed his donkey is beaten before their eyes. He closes his. The cheers echo in his ears.
He was despised, rejected, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. He was despised, rejected, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief.
She follows the procession from the palace to the hill, sees him through the bruises and the blood, watches him struggle with every step. In her hands, she carries an alabaster jar. When they stop, she finds a way through the crowd so that she can stand as close to him as she is allowed. She knows he doesn't know she is there. She is too far away. She bites her lips and keeps her eyes open as they hammer in the nails. She doesn't want him to be alone. She stays as the sun rises higher, feels it bristle her back, sees the soldiers throw lots for his things. She is there when the sign is hung above his head, King of the Jews. She stands and faces the passers-by who mock and insult him. 3 hours later, she is still there when the sky grows black and the darkness settles. For another 3 hours she stays in the shadows. She hears him cry out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" She sees him drink from the sponge dipped in vinegar. She is looking at his face when he cries out a moment later. And as he dies, the jar slips from her hands.
He was despised, rejected, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. He was despised, rejected, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief.
He offered to stay in the temple. He is there that morning, same as every day. He smooths down his robes, makes sure all is in order, everything as it should be. He does not think of the man who is dying on the hill. When the sky darkens, he goes to the Holy of Holies to pray. He stays there for 3 hours on his knees. As he prays, he hears a ripping sound behind him. He stands and turns, eyes wide, mouth fallen open. The curtain has torn in two. He feels exposed. It is finished.
He was despised, rejected, a man of sorrows, and acquainted with grief. He was despised, rejected, a man of sorrows, and acquainted with